Christy Lefteri's novel, The Beekeeper of Aleppo, became an international sensation on its release in 2019. Inspired by her experiences at a volunteer centre in Athens, where she helped Syrian and Afghan refugees, Christy felt compelled to tell the stories of the people she met there.
The Beekeeper of Aleppo has now sold more than 500,000 copies, and by the end of 2020 was the third best-selling paperback of the year. Christy has been nominated for a British Book Award and the Dayton Literary Peace Prize, and won the Aspen Words Literary Prize.
Her drive to influence change through her writing led to another novel, Songbirds, about the experience of human migration and the search for a better life. It is published in July, and it is as devastating and beautiful as The Beekeeper.
Christy recently won the Nielsen Gold Bestseller Award for over 500,000 copies sold of Beekeeper. Congratulations, Christy, and welcome to our podcast.
Hi, thanks so much, and thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for coming. So let's talk more about your first book, The Beekeeper of Aleppo, by moving on to the first of your three things that you would change about the world so it's as it should be.
Yeah.
So you have said that, number one, refugees need to feel welcome in the countries where they settle.
Yeah.
We need to develop a sense of empathy and being able to welcome people.
hmm
Can you tell us about, first of all, your own experiences as a child of refugees and how that feeds into your storytelling?
Yeah, of course. My parents both became refugees after the war in Cyprus in 1974. My dad was actually a commanding officer during that war, so I think he suffered a lot of trauma. Well, he definitely did. I didn't really speak to him about it until actually The Beekeeper of Aleppo came out, and I was writing an article for The Observer about transgenerational trauma and how trauma, especially when it's not spoken about, can be transferred into the next generation. As I was growing up, I felt that although my dad he didn't talk about the war and his experiences, and my mum didn't either, it was there in their reactions. And so, for example, my dad would kind of overreact to something, and children naturally don't have the means to sort of question that kind of thing too deeply. So I think I ended up blaming myself about a lot of things, and it was only until years later when I went into therapy that I could kind of piece the jigsaw together and realize that a lot of the things that my dad was annoyed about didn't actually have anything to do with me. Um, but, I think this is the thing with trauma, that it can come out in different ways, and sometimes it comes out in ways that seem completely disconnected to the thing that's happened. So that's not to sort of blame my dad, or that's not to say that he was a horrible bad person or anything like that. It's just a way of kind of looking at, um, I don't know, a way of me understanding what some of my parents' reactions might have been during my childhood, and how that was like completely, entirely related to the catastrophe that they'd experienced themselves. So that was so much part of my life growing up. It was such a huge thing. So I was always interested in like displacement and how it affects people, how it affects how we treat those people that we love. So it might not be a huge trauma like war, it could be a different kind of trauma. And it's often the people we love the most that feel the impact of those traumas. So I
Yeah.
think that's really why I've always been interested in writing about these kind of subjects.
It's interesting as well that you write, you're a creative writer, you're a novelist, but you also, I think, you're a psychotherapist as well. So that there's different kind of ways of understanding, aren't there? And it's really interesting that you come at it from those two very clear ways of trying to explicate and understand other people's stories.
It was psychoanalytic psychotherapy training for, oh God, it was a number of years, and I worked as an honorary psychotherapist at the Gordon Hospital in Westminster. So I worked with a lot of people that had suffered from trauma, but I no longer work as a psychotherapist. So I think everything I learned while I was doing the training and while I was working at the Gordon has really helped me to understand the characters that I'm writing about and that sort of thing.
Yeah, you say in the Bookkeeper of Aleppo, in Syria there is a saying: "Inside the person you know, there is a person you do not know." Um,
Yeah,
is this idea that we kind of all carry our past with us?
yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. And in ourselves too.
yeah,
So there's parts of ourselves that we might not realize that we actually don't know because it's so buried,
Mm.
So I don't know. I'll go back to the example with my dad after I wrote The Beekeeper, and I wrote that article in the Observer, and I went for a walk, just to have a break from writing the article, and he said to me, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, blah blah blah. I was writing this article," and I told him what it was about. And he said, "Oh, that's interesting. What does that mean?" And I explained it, and as soon as I explained what it meant, he said to me, "Oh," he said, "the reason I never spoke about the war is because I wanted to protect you."
Right.
And all these memories came out. This was for the first time ever. He started talking about all these people that had died, that he felt that because he was the commanding officer, he felt that he should have saved them. And
Wow.
all this stuff that just, I actually remember where I was. I was walking down Palmer's Green High Street, Green Lanes in North London, and I was outside the Red Cross bookshop, and I just stood there, and the thing is, that's just an example, I think, of the quote that's in the book, in the sense that there were all these memories just there inside my dad growing up. He said to me during that phone call that after the war, he was thinking, like, even now 40 years later, he thinks about the war like every week. So
Right.
imagine back then, 40 years ago, he must have been drowning in it. So inside him was a person I didn't know. And I think that, okay, that's an extreme version because he had a lot of trauma, but I think that's the case with everybody. We've all got these kind of sides to us that are so buried.
Mm. Why do you think we haven't got better at welcoming refugees, globally and in the UK?
Oh God, that's such a good question. And it's a question that I ask myself every day. And I don't know if I have an answer for that. I think my instinct is to say fear.
Mm.
We hold on to fear, like, I don't know, the way that refugees are presented in the media, not all media, but I think people get this sense that maybe there's something dangerous, or there's something unknowable, there's something, that there might be people here that are here in order to cause some sort of trouble, or and I think that it's like, it's that distancing, it's that detachment, it's that putting people into huge sweeping categories where you don't we can't actually, we forget that people are human just like us.
Mm.
And I don't know if it's because, like, when I watch the news and stuff, and especially before I went to Athens to volunteer, there was a lot of sort of crisis imagery and a lot of kind of non-specific language. Even when the reporting was positive, it was all very kind of, there was something about it that didn't allow me to feel connected.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably one of the reasons, because there's a lack of that sort of real genuine connection between people. Everything's so fast. We turn the TV on, we turn it off quick. It's like we can switch anything off and switch it on. Facebook,
Mm.
Twitter, blah blah blah. And there isn't that sort of, like, I don't know, like with a book or with a film or with a documentary, where you're really going to sit with it and actually learn about people. And unless we do that, then fear just gets worse and worse, and prejudice will grow. And so I think, I don't know, I mean, I've given a bit of a waffly answer because I don't really know the answer, but
I mean, it was a big question.
yeah.
That's fair enough.
Yeah.
I think there's something about othering, isn't there, where it's just easier to think that that is not my experience, so I can't, I almost can't engage. But I think that's
Yeah.
why storytelling, and particularly the stories that you've told, are such a powerful way. You can bang people over the head with kind of polemic, but actually humanizing it, and storytelling is
Mm.
like the most primal way of us communicating, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that. And I think it's the best way to to elicit empathy, I suppose.
Mm,
Yeah, well,
yeah.
actually, you said, Christine, something you wrote. You said other people's stories can help us listen to our own, which I
Mhm.
found very moving and, very simple. But it's getting those people to a point where they're going to listen, linking back
Yeah.
to the refugees, which is the hard part.
Yeah, that I know. Yeah. And how and the question is how.
Mm.
Um Well, the thing is, I think, thinking about the beekeeper, I've had a lot of messages from people where they've said to me, it's changed my mind about what I thought about refugees, which to me, that's wow, I think, gosh, I remember when I was writing it, I thought, well, if I can manage to do that with one person, then that's one great thing that I've done. And actually, I've been, to receive these messages and to see them in front of me, I think, well, that's something, to get people to listen to the stories. So I think I'm lucky in the sense that the book has reached so many readers, but then the question remains, how do we get people to listen to other stories, real life stories as well? Um, and I think, I don't know, I think there just needs to be so much more out there.
How has it changed your sort of how has it changed your life, I guess?
The volunteering in itself that I did before writing the book, that already changed my life.
Mm.
And I guess that's why I wrote the book, because I couldn't stop thinking about the children and the people that I'd met at the centre where I worked. I came back to the UK and I was feeling really guilty because I had my passport and I could come back, and I kept thinking about the children that were still living in the old airport that had been turned into a camp, or the old school that was a camp, or Pedion do Areos, which you'll recognise from the book, which is a park that had been turned into a camp. So I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And that's the bit that really changed my life. And then I suppose the way that the success of the beekeeper has changed my life is that it's meant that it's given me an opportunity to write more, which is really all I want to do. I really want to write more because, like, I find all these things that I'm so passionate about. And ever since I was a little girl, when I get really overwhelmed with emotion or I get really passionate about something and I think, oh my God, why is this happening? I just want to write about it. So, which is then what ended up happening with my next book, because I became really passionate about something else, and I thought, well, thank goodness that I'm in the position where my publishers want me to write something else, so I can continue to write about the things I care about. And
Mm.
I think that's how it's changed my life. Like that for me, that's the most important thing.
So you've just mentioned your new book, Songbirds, and
Mm,
I think I read somewhere that you wanted to make a distinction through that book between this kind of arbitrary classification of refugees and migrants, and one is good and
mm,
one is less good.
yeah,
So you tell the story of an economic migrant.
yeah.
What did you set out to do with Songbirds?
Well, the thing is, I'll start. I'll answer that question by saying where the inspiration came from the beginning. Was when I was on tour for the Beekeeper of Aleppo. Often people would say something or ask me something like, how can we get people to understand that refugees aren't like migrants, that they come because they have to come, and often that question always made me feel a bit sad, because I thought, okay, but there are so many other reasons why people feel that they have to leave their homes. And then shortly after that, I was informed by a friend. She sent me a newspaper article about these women in Cyprus, and my family are from Cyprus. So domestic workers, um, five domestic workers and their two children that had gone missing, and nobody would search for them because they were foreign.
Mm.
And I just started following this story and getting increasingly upset and increasingly angry because I wasn't surprised that nobody was searching for these women and the children because they were foreign.
Mm.
And that was what was making me angry, the fact that I wasn't surprised. And so, anyway, I continued to follow the story, which, ended up being a very, very, very sad events to follow. And I was saddened by it so much that I used that as my inspiration for my next novel. And the Songbirds, so it's about migration, but it's also about poaching.
Mm.
And the Songbirds become a symbol of kind of the women that travel, hoping to either find a way to help their families or to find freedom. Whereas in actual fact, they found themselves horrendously trapped in ways that are kind of unimaginable.
I was curious about whether you think you would have written The Beekeeper of Aleppo had you not gone into therapy training or gone down that path.
Probably not. I don't think I would. I don't know. Do you know, this is another question I've asked myself loads of times, because I was in therapy while I was writing it. Um, I don't, and sometimes I think to myself, if I wasn't in therapy, would I have been able to write it? I don't
Mm.
know. I just don't know. I don't know. I don't think so, to be honest. And the stuff I learnt while doing that training as well, about how kind of, and even when I was working at the Gordon, about how, like, so like with the character of Nuri, about how his trauma manifests itself, and how Afra's trauma manifests. And I won't say too much because then it might kind of, too many spoilers. But I think no, no, no. I'm gonna
Mm. It
decide on
feels
an
like it
answer.
was like fate in a way.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
no, to be honest, when I realized that I didn't want to be a clinician and I stopped the training, I remember talking to my tutor. It was at the Lincoln Center, and and I said to her, "I'm going to stop the training. I don't want to be a clinician. It's definitely not something. I've just realized I don't want to do it." But I did say to her, "I really want to use what I've learned in whatever it is that I'm going to write." And so I knew I was going to return to writing. I just knew I wanted to. I didn't know what I was going to write at that point, but I even said to her, whatever I've learned, I'm going to use it. I've absorbed it and I'm going to use it. So I sort of knew I was going to use it.
yeah, it was like a
Mm.
wonderful stepping stone.
Yeah.
Mm. Well, I'm going to move on to question 2 now. I mean, we could talk about your writing and inspiration for hours, but the second way that you would change the world if you could make it the way you
hmm
wanted it to be would be, you say, to stop taking so much from the environment. We need to
hmm
extend our compassion to the environment. What do you mean by that?
Well, this answer came directly from writing Songbirds, because I was so kind of like engrossed in researching. So basically, I'll just tell you a little bit about the Songbirds, and it applies to so many things, like so many things. I think this is a good example. So in Cyprus and in other parts of Europe, there's a tradition, and it's now become more than a tradition. It's like a huge underground organization, um, where people trap these tiny little songbirds, which are called blackcaps. They trap other tiny birds too, but blackcaps are very, 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 very sought after. And what they do is so this used to be a tradition in Cyprus. So old men in the village, for example, used to go out and make these lime sticks, put them out on the trees, and trap about 10 or 20 black caps to feed their families. So the birds, it's still cruel, but it was a way of, people. There weren't supermarkets and things back then, so it was a way of kind of hunting for food that was easy for them. So they'd put the lime sticks up. The birds would come down and get stuck on these lime sticks, and the more they tried to escape, the more trapped they got. So now what's happened is this has become such a huge, huge, huge criminal organization that people, and it's highly, 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 highly illegal. Like if someone gets caught, they'll be sent to, well, there'll definitely be a fine and maybe even a jail sentence. And we're talking about, I think the fine might be something like 20,000 or 30,000. So they're putting themselves at risk by doing this in the first place. So they go out and put out mist nets and hundreds of these lime sticks, and they put out calling devices. So what they essentially want to do is catch as many of these black caps as possible that are migrating from Africa to Europe or back again. So they stop these birds on their journey and catch thousands and thousands and thousands of them, and they literally make a killing.
Mm.
And they
Um,
sell these birds.
they sell them. It's basically what happens because they're illegal to sell. So if you go into a restaurant and ask for, each restaurant has its own code. So let's say, for example, you ask for couscous, they'll know to bring you a big terracotta, I don't know, jug that's got like loads of songbirds inside. I mean, I went to a wedding a few years ago where they came out just before the bride and groom danced. And weddings in Cyprus, there's like 1,000 people there. So I went to a wedding just before the bride and groom were about to dance, the waiters came out with at least, my God, there must have been about 50 trays, and each tray was huge. And there were about 100 black caps on each one of these trays. So imagine how many of those little birds were killed for this particular one wedding. And I remember sitting there next to my brother, and he got so annoyed. And and the thing is, and I think this is my point, that that's one example. There's greed. There's greed there. There's, the people that are poachers. They want to kill as much as they can so they can make as much money as possible. There's no respect for the environment, for nature, for these tiny little birds. So I think that can extend to so many things, like battery farming, everything. There's so much. I just think we take too much. Animals take what they need.
That's what's so distressing about the way that the birds are. You describe the book, the birds being trapped in Songbirds. Is it's not just the black caps; it's like all the birds. So
oh my God,
kestrels and owls, and it's kind of like trawl fishing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really know about fishing, but you know how that they just sweep the ocean floor and kill everything, take everything. And how inhuman, literally, that is.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not saying, and I'm not saying people should be vegetarian. I'm saying we should think about what we're taking and how we're taking it. And I think that's if I could change anything, because I think I would feel like I was being, I don't know. I think I wouldn't, if I was saying, I would wish that everyone wouldn't eat animals, I think I'd be being a hypocrite because I'm not vegetarian. I just wish that we could be really compassionate and thoughtful about how we treat animals, how we treat the environment, what we take from the environment, what we take from this beautiful earth that we live on. Because otherwise, we're going to end up destroying it and destroying ourselves along the way.
And do you think it's going to change? Are you feeling quite optimistic?
I don't know. I didn't feel optimistic. I guess the silver lining of COVID, if there can be one, is that we've all calmed down a bit. We've all paused a little bit. And I just hope that we can, I don't know, like I remember when this time last year when we went into lockdown and suddenly we could all hear the birds again, and it was like, oh my God, the world's gone quiet. What's going on? And of course we can't live like that forever, but I just hope that we've learned something and we can kind of take it into the future with us.
Yeah, we hope so. I mean, in The Beekeeper, there's a lot of male violence, and I'm wondering, I mean, when we imagine a poacher, I imagine most people will imagine a male. Do you feel that men should be leading the charge to kind of solve this issue, or do you think it's going to have to come from women?
Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, in the story, it's Yannis that's poaching. He's a man, and he goes on he has his own journey of discovery where he has to kind of, in a way, find himself again, as cliched as that sounds. But, he has to find the version of him that could understand the world differently, the version of him that's linked to his past and his ancestors and his grandfather. I don't know. I think people just have to come together. I can't say whether it has to be men or women. Okay, in the story, it's Yannis. And I mean, to be honest, when I did my research, I did not meet any female poachers. That doesn't mean they don't exist, but I personally didn't meet any female poachers. So, it's a bit, I think, oh, should I say that? But that is the reality. I didn't meet any female poachers.
So in terms of your research, it'd be great to hear a bit more about, obviously your parents came over here, you were brought up in London, but like how much do you connect to their history, and how much does it feed into your identity?
A lot, but not songbirds at weddings.
Good.
Greek dancing, Greek food, or I should say Cypriot, because Greek and Greece is slightly different. It really a lot. I went to Greek school. I speak Greek. My first language was actually Greek, and it's the Greek that my grandma spoke, which is a real kind of slang village kind of Greek, which I love. But when I go to Greece and speak like that, nobody knows what I'm talking about. Whereas if I go to Cyprus, they're like, "Oh my goodness, you sound like how the grandmothers sounded back in the day." And I love that I've got that, and I've sort of held on to it. I think like when I went to Greek school, we were taught a very specific history about Cyprus,
Right.
because obviously it's an island that's still divided. There's so much history, British colonialism, and all of that. But I think my mum used to say to me, because it was very one-sided what we learnt at Greek school, and my mum always said to me, the story is far more complex than what they're teaching you at Greek school. But she wouldn't expand.
Right.
Like, she never said more. So I think what happened is that from her saying that, it really inspired me to research. So yes, I've got all the kind of normal stuff like the food and the dancing and blah, blah, blah. But I also had this passion to go and research the history of Cyprus. And I did that as part of my PhD. So I did a PhD where I wrote my first novel, A Watermelon, a Fish and a Bible, which is actually set during the invasion of Cyprus in 1974. And what I wanted to research was the fight for independence against British rule in the 1950s, and how that was linked to kind of nationalism and nationalistic ideals, and how basically the Greek Cypriots shot themselves in the foot by wanting to join with Greece. And there were all these things that I researched and I learned and I understood about my heritage, about the past of Cyprus, about the links between Cyprus and um, Britain, Cyprus and the Ottoman Empire, Cyprus and the Greek Empire, and it helped me to learn so much about our world as well in general. So it started off with the normal things that children will become introduced to naturally, like food and dancing and that kind of thing. But then I kind of went my own direction and decided to really deeply research these things.
And did you ask your grandmother about her experiences the same way that you questioned your dad and things came pouring out? Was there
My
anything that you learnt?
From my grandmother?
Mm.
Well, my grandmother was a single mother in Cyprus when that was unheard of, because my grandfather just got up and left one day. And so I think I learnt a lot from her in terms of what it meant. Like, she used to work in the cotton fields, and she was a proper working class um, single mother who was trying her best to bring up 4 children at a time where there were no single mothers, so there was no support. So I learned a lot from her when it came to things like that,
She
and her
sounds amazing.
experiences there, and how, and how when the war started, what it was like for her as a single mother with 4 children, and what was she going to do? And hearing those stories and hearing her struggles, I think those stories really stayed with me. She would talk about it. And I just realized what strength she must have had to have been able to kind of, as a refugee, make that journey, and as a single mother too.
Do you know
Um,
whatever happened to your grandfather?
yeah, I only met him once when I was 5 years old, and he was dying of lung cancer. He came to London, um, and he met somebody else, and he lived in Archway, and he was one of these people that sort of kept making money and then gambling it away and making it again and gambling it away. And when I met him, I went with my mum, just me and my mum, to the hospital. I think it was a hospital in Archway. And I was about 5 or 6, and I sat next to him on the bed. And my mum, I remember this like it was yesterday. My mum was sitting next to me, and he held my hand, not hers, and cried and told me he was sorry. So I think he wanted to do that to my mum. He wanted to say those things to my mum, but he said them to me instead. And I was a 5-year-old. I mean, I didn't know what was going on. I just remember this very old, dying man who was crying and holding my hand and apologizing.
Wow.
Did your grandmother know that you met him?
Yeah, she knew. Yeah. Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah.
It's entirely unrelated, so I'm just not even going to attempt to segue. So I'm just going to move us to your third thing that you change
Yeah.
to make the world as it should be, which I am fully behind, which is simply that we all need to slow down a bit.
Hmm.
So can you tell us a bit more about this?
Yeah, and I think it's actually related to my first point and my second point, well, mostly my second point. And it's what I was talking about before, like before lockdown, I just felt like I didn't even realize there was another way of living. I didn't even realize that I wasn't thinking about my neighbors or the
Mm.
people in my life as much as that. I just didn't even realize I was just, it was that it's just after when lockdown happened, and it was really frightening. And there are a number of family members and things that died, and it was a really sad, it's been a really horrible and sad time. But there's one thing, and that was the fact that we slowed down, and I was able to say, okay, well, I am here, and who else is here? And my dad had COVID, and he overcame it, and so did his wife. And because my mom passed away, so my dad remarried, and I was able to kind of slow down and say, well, okay, I don't need to go to all these places. I don't need to rush around like a headless chicken. So I can give some more time to people, some more time to thinking, or just walking, or just being.
Listening to the
Just
birds.
listening to the birds. I know, but yeah, I spent so many days walking around that park, and I bought a puppy. I know, like so many people bought dogs. But hold on, in my defense, I was going to buy a dog before lockdown.
Sure.
So
Loads of people
What they all
ringing in.
say.
She was going to buy it anyway.
I actually have proof, because
I've got a receipt.
if you could see me now, I would show you Alfie, because
I would love to see
Oh.
Alfie.
he's so cute.
What breed is he?
He's a Havanese.
Oh,
I do not know. I'm going to
They
quickly Google
used to
that when
be
we get off.
They used to be Cuban circus dogs. They're really quite comical, and he's just great company. But this is what I mean about slowing down, and then look, like the environment, and people have started thinking more about their carbon footprints, and
Mm.
I think people were trying to get everyone to listen before, and I think nothing was changing, and then suddenly things were changing, but because of a bad thing like COVID. But I just wonder if there's a chance that we might be able to hold on to that thing, that slight, I don't know what to call it.
Like a
That slight,
deceleration.
yeah.
Mm. Yeah. I think hopefully, I think now, like, I get really flustered with there's like one thing out of the house in my diary. I'm so used to just being in a room at home. So maybe that's not a good thing. But I hope you're right. I hope that we all can develop a kind of slower pace, especially in London. It's it's such a hectic kind of
Yeah.
treadmill that we all find ourselves on.
And pollution, it would help the pollution, it would help, I think it would just help so many. Obviously, we don't want to be isolated and trapped and locked down, but I just hope that we can learn something and just take it with us into the future.
Have you developed any socially unacceptable habits during lockdown that you can disclose to us?
I think yes, but I don't think people realize just yet. because I think, like, when we come out of lockdown and people are like, oh, let's go here, I'm going to be like, nah, no, I really can't be bothered. I think I will be more able to say no to things.
Yes.
I don't know if that's socially unacceptable. I don't think that's socially unacceptable, but I think I'll be slightly less sociable. I think I've realized that my own company isn't as scary as I thought, and that I can actually chill out for very long periods of time without getting bored. So
I think there's going to be a pressure for people to go out, though, because you can't really use the excuse that you've been out every night. You're really tired. You haven't been at home for ages. So.
Yeah, but we can say it overwhelms us. Like,
yeah.
Get overwhelmed.
That's true. Shona, have you developed any habits that are socially unacceptable during lockdown?
I think my existing ones have just become enhanced. So there aren't any new ones, but they've just grown in regularity.
Are we allowed to know what any of them are?
Not at all.
Oh, okay.
What about you, Catherine?
I'm sure there are many. I just can't. I can't think. Structured clothing is obviously terrifying now. Conversations involving more than one other person, not through the mediation of a screen, is terrifying. It would be very odd to kind of to touch. Oh, that sounds terrible. To touch people and to have physical. This sounds bad. This is more than socially unacceptable.
There's a
This is
certain
illegal.
freedom, isn't there? I mean, I had apple crumble and custard for lunch today, and I mean, who does that? It's just to clear stuff out of my fridge, and I'm like, no one's looking. But
I love that.
I would never have done that in normal life.
And do you know what? I keep thinking, like, before you said about the apple crumble and custard, I actually had this thought, and I thought, oh my God, what will I do? What will I do without peanut butter? Because it's not like you can take peanut butter with you.
No, it has to be crunchy though, Christy.
We are really used to snacking, aren't we? We've snacked continually for 12 months.
Exactly.
You're right. Not eating every hour or so is going to be very difficult.
And I need to eat peanut butter with a spoon out of the jars.
You're not a savage. You use a spoon.
Exactly. Or Nutella, but okay, I shouldn't really admit that. But so those are bad habits that I've developed.
And you're still teaching creative writing as well through lockdown?
Yeah, so I've got an MA class at Brunel University, and the module that I'm teaching at the moment is called Planning a Novel. Yeah, so I have 4 students. Last year for the same module, I had 15 students.
Wow.
Yeah, so you can see how COVID has really affected, the numbers. But they're an absolutely amazing class, and I feel like I learned from teaching as well. I still learn about my own writing and my own kind of, because we do a lot of workshopping, so I try and help my students to sort of understand how to offer constructive feedback and how to accept it as well, which is something so important that I also need to kind of remember while I'm writing. And
I think all good teaching should involve learning as well. Otherwise, you're just the guy that I had at university with a frill shirt talking about himself. That's not. It's just, that's why I don't like poetry. But anyway, it's an exchange, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you this evening.
Oh, you're welcome. I've loved talking to you guys.
Good. It's really good fun. And good. Best of luck with Songbirds. It's such a brilliant book.
Thank you.
We might have to have you on to talk about Songbirds, I think.
Oh, that would be brilliant. I'd love to chat to you all again. It's been so fun.
Brilliant. Thank you, Christy. And Songbirds is out in July. We'll look forward to you all getting a taste of it then.
Thank you.